Hi, I'm an artist, and a very long time ago, I had a fateful encounter with a very beautiful lady. And we had a great time together, but the next day, she disappeared from my life. But her beauty was so great that I could not stop thinking about her from that day. So today, no matter how hard things are, no matter how long it takes, I have made up my mind that I will pay her a revisit. So originally I met this lady during Mermaid last year, where I designed a bunch of humanoid mer creatures, and she in particular was inspired by Scarlet. And for this repaint, I did come up with a few different ideas, and finally I chose the one that looked quite similar to the original. But at the same time, it's also loosely inspired by a really famous Buddhist sculpture in Vietnam. It's called Tượng Quan Âm Nhìn Mắt Nhìn Tay, which can be roughly translated into, very roughly. The original design reminded me of this sculpture, so that's the reason why we have this here. Anyway, this one turned out to be a lot more complicated and time consuming than I thought, so there will be a lot of jump cuts because I don't think I can include everything. Yes, even as the sped up version, so yeah, a disclaimer or a warning, a disclaimer. So the sketch for this one did have quite a lot of different elements, so I made each part in different colors. And you can do that by clicking on this stripy icon over here and then checking off different active channels over here. So you can see that the hand sketch was in red because I unchecked the red channel, and the background was in a turquoise-ish color because I unchecked, I think, the blue and the green channel. So yeah, a very handy thing to have. And before we go, I just wanted to show you this glory side of all the hand references. Yes, I needed this many for this painting. The next step is blocking out the base layer, and I mainly worked on three main groups, like the background, the lady, and the foreground. And the whole time I was like, do I really have to make all the hands so complicated like this? And also contemplating on whether I should put the jewelry on her or not. And the answer was yes. So I did, using the circle drawing tool, like work smarter, not harder. After that, I began putting down some colors using a color palette I prepared beforehand, which looked like this. So, do you remember the Russian roulette color wheel thingies I talked about before? As you can see, I played that game a whole lot with this color palette, especially within this lighter range of value around this part. And what I wanted to focus on the most was this big highlight over here. And in the painting, it was on top of her head. So as long as everything else has roughly the same value, I don't really care what kind of colors they were, and the more the merrier. And I also kept the shadow part fairly simple as well, like mainly just a really dark deep blue, and yeah, I think this would look pretty fun. As you can see on the screen, I covered pretty much everything in this kind of greenish yellow, which admittedly didn't look the most appetizing, and also arguably maybe a touch bit too dark. Past me also thought the same thing, but present me will tell you that please don't worry too much, things will look a lot better. So for the face, I practically tried to put the whole rainbow on there, and after doing that, I think the dirty yellow looked a lot better, and putting the highlight in really tie everything together as well. Like, to be honest with you, this greenish yellow did look pretty good with the whole golden highlight. I think they made a really nice contrast together, and yep, those highlights were my favorite part of the face. So while we were painting the face, let's talk a little bit more about the compositions. So originally, the lady had more of a cone shape within an oval-ish shape. Yeah, what? For this repaint though, I wanted to make her even more oval, like with the focus on her face and also the big eye in the middle of the painting. And as for her hair, since I didn't want to change the original design too much, I kept the triangular, like the cone shape, but made it a lot more rounded to fit in a little bit better with the surrounding. And if I had to put it into a diagram, then things may look like this. If any chance it looked a little bit too familiar to anything else, I swear there's nothing fishy going on here. Please believe me, believe I'm begging you. So let's move on to something else, shall we? So next, I painted the hair, which was not exactly meant to be only hair, but also meat, like scallop meat. And also had this kind of pearlescent texture. So why pearlescent? Why pearl? Well, first it was because I have learned how to paint pearl since the last time I did the original design, so I wanted to incorporate that knowledge in here somehow. And second, the original was kinda monotonously white. You can say that it was a part of the design, but personally, I wanted to include more, like a lot more colors in this version, so pearl it is. So how pearl? What did I do to try to make it look pearlescent? And it was the bending effect. At least that is what I called it, which looks something like this. And this is something we may encounter a lot when painting glossy surfaces like pearl or ceramic. So I incorporated that effect a lot while doing the hair. But to be honest with you, I don't really know if this was readable as pearlescent or pearl when finished. But one thing for certain is that this was very colorful. So I will say it was a huge success in that regard, at least. By the way, do you remember the meat part? Well, to make the hair look similar to that kind of material, I made things stringy, like drawing strands of hair meat hanging down wherever I can. Now, when I say that out loud, it does sound quite gross, but whatever. And the hair on the left was looking way more stringy than the right. So later on, I did go back to add more to the stringiness of the right part to balance them out a little bit more. At this point, when almost finished the hair, I vividly remember looking at it and thinking to myself, oh, this highlight part looks an awfully lot like a glowing helmet. So I did some experiment off camera trying to fix it, and now it looked an awfully lot like a glowing helmet with some LED stringing lights. And I was devastated. So devastated that I started to blame things. And here's, let me read you my note at the time. Is it because the top of her hair too tall? Then why the f did it look normal to me when I sketched her? With 2 question mark and 2 exclamation mark. Anyway, let's move on to the hair at the back. So I followed the same kind of philosophy, an amalgamation of hair, meat and pearl, with so many strings of meat and also so many colors. But this time it was shaped in a way that resembled lotus, like the flower, with a more stylized approach. Because it is a rather common symbol that appears a lot in Buddhism, and because of the inspiration, like the sculpture, if you still remember that, I wanted to incorporate that in this painting somehow. And my favorite part was the lower strands of hair over here and there, because they look extra meaty and stringy to me, and I enjoyed that look a lot. Next is the actual meat part of the scallop lady, and this part was not very accurate in the original at all, even though the fact that a living scallop could open the shells to this extent was also not very accurate, but So I tried to keep a reference nearby, and you can see that there are like 2 parts, like the upper one has this kind of black and white stripy kind of pattern, and the lower one is a bunch of tentacles? I don't really know, nearly stuck together like this. And unlike the original version, which was just some generic part of meat slapped on the shell, this version was definitely an upgrade. So the lower part was also where the eyes were. So the eyes, my absolutely favorite part of the whole painting. And I think by now you guys may notice how much I enjoyed putting random eyes on the creatures in my painting, but And I love making them cluster to each other like this, like so much fun. And I also enjoyed how blue all of them were too. Like they look like little gems dotting around on this part. So pretty. And yeah, definitely one of the highlights for me. Maybe too high to the point that my brain was kinda hurt painting this. And yeah, I'm not kidding. I did have a legit headache. And it was rather bad to the point that I have to go to bed very early that day. Oh gosh, this was so Lovecraftian. Oh, anyway, I really wanted to do more that day, but me dead, so bye. Okay, so it was the next day and it was time for the meat at the back. So when I went to check how I connected the hair and the meat in the original design, I realized I made the hands play rock, paper, scissors with each other. Plus me was having fun back then, I guess. Anyway, in the original, I just kinda blended them into each other. So this time, I just follow the same method. And then I was contemplating on whether I should put the eye on the back meat or not. Because the headache the day before kinda scared me a little. But finally, I decided to put some tiny one on there. Like, not too many, in order to avoid any potential headache, you know. So the big eyes, one of the two focal points of the whole painting. And at first, I thought of putting some scallop pearl in there, but it might look a little bit out of place, since there were not any other pearls anywhere else in the painting. So in the end, I went with a big blue eye, just like all the little eyes on the mid part, and I think it looked pretty okay when finished. Yeah. I worked on the shell next. But to be honest, it was not that exciting. And this video was getting kinda long, like very long. So I think we should skip this. Yeah. After that, because I think I would save the hand for the last moment. So working on the background first it is. So the setting was in a dripstone cave, so that everything was dark except for the strong light right above the scallop lady. And to be honest, since I painted the lady way too detailed already, so I think I should keep the background rocks really rough and simple, so that they wouldn't compete for attention with the main lady. Like when zoomed in, they were really just some random brush strokes, but that's okay. You know, again, for not taking a lot of attention away from the lady. And I also added some sparkling effect on some of the rocks, you know, in order to make them look a little bit more magical. But just a tiny bit, not too much, you know. At the end of the session, I did a little hand painting demo, and I really like how that one turned out. So let me tell you how I did the transparent hand thingies. So for them, I used transparent mask. And before that, I was thinking whether I should use a mask or just manually paint the transparent effect on the hands by myself. And I ended up choosing the mask, which came in really handy later on. But we will talk about that in a moment. So for now, how the mask works. So it is like a filter layer where you can only paint black and white. So black makes things disappear and white makes them appear. And gray is every level of translucent depending on how dark it is. So when painting the hand, I used white on the edge of the hand and fingers to make them readable as hands and not some transparent random blobs. So the hardest thing when doing this was maybe trying to remember which finger was behind which, because you know, the hands were transparent, so you can totally see normally hidden fingers. Yeah, so that's what kinda hard to pay attention to. And I will show you some of my favorite hands on the screen, and not all of them, because if doing that, it will be very long. So when sketching these hands, I focused on making them look as long and as elegant as possible. Maybe borderline a tiny bit inhuman in some of the hands, but Comparing to the previous version, where they were playing rock, paper and scissors and also making hers, this was definitely a big upgrade, a very big one at that. And I think the inspiration from the sculpture was pretty clear after putting all the hands in, so yeah, I am quite pleased with all of them. Finally, it was time for all the bling bling jewelries, and I chose gold for all of them. And to be honest, I don't fully know the reason behind this choice. Maybe to match with the golden highlights, maybe, but I'm not sure. Anyway, I simplified things a lot, mainly used like 3 colors or something to paint all the gold stuff. And mostly because at this point I had spent way too much time on this painting. And I couldn't wait for the moment when I finally was done with this. By the way, do you wonder how long this took? Like 22 hours of active painting times in Krita. But actually a whole month IRL, because I work on this while also making other videos too. And also 1 month was only for the painting part, and like not including the brainstorming, the reference writing, in other words, the preparing for the painting part. So 1.5 months. And wow, that's what long. Wow. Anyway, that was one of the reasons. And the other one was the same as in the background part, like in order to not fight for people's attention too much, as most of the attention should remain on the lady herself. Anyway, here's one more of my favorite parts, painting the bracelet hidden behind the hands. And this was the reason why I used the transparent mask, so that you can add more things behind the transparent objects without repainting the whole thing. And it was looking so satisfying, like I like it so much. So anyway, I think after this one we are done. Finally. So yeah, that was the painting and also the video. If you are still watching at this point, there's no word that can describe how thankful I am for you right now, but I still have to say it. Thank you so much. Hope you enjoy how the reimagined Scarlet Lady came to life, and also hope you have a great day/night ahead. See you later.